Hey there, it's time for another Amiga episode of my Nostalgia Trip Games. This time, I'm going to be using some emulated footage in addition to footage from my actual Amiga 500 because the first game for today requires some demonstration of the advantages of having an AGA graphics card and more than 1 megabyte of RAM, both of which I don't have. Of course, Skidmarks is just one example of many, but it is one of the rare examples where I have experienced it firsthand.
Skidmarks is an isometrically viewed racing game in which the main emphasis is on the physics modeling of sliding, and also the gimmick of seeing the cars leaving tire tracks, aka skid marks, on the track. While the graphical gimmick wore off quickly enough, the game proved to be prime material for grinding to achieve better lap times. Not that they ever got recorded anywhere, but getting better at driving through all the tracks was joyful enough to keep going at it for a few years on and off in our youth. Since none of my friends had more than 1 megabyte of RAM, nor did anyone have an AGA graphics card or anything fancy like that, the way that we experienced Skidmarks was with just one type of car at a time on the track, meaning that you and all your opponents had a similar car, and also no music at all. The only way I have managed to experience Skidmarks in its full potential so far is through emulation. Sure, it adds something to the overall experience, but nothing so valuable as to make me hunt down an Amiga 1200 or whatever. The 1 megabyte way is how I got familiar with the game, and it's the only real way for me to do nostalgia tripping with this game. Although I have to admit, the full-blown 4 megabyte version with AGA graphics, it's pretty damn good fun to play on WinUAE every now and then. Not a game I revisit all that much anymore, but Rockstar Ate My Hamster definitely made a lasting impression on me back in the day. This is a manager game in which you take anything from 1 to 4 rock stars for you to manage, and your job is to get your chosen rock star, or rock stars, perform well, release great hit singles and albums, tour all over the world, do publicity stunts and hope that the rock star doesn't die while at it, or you don't get bankrupt while performing your miracles. It's not a particularly realistic manager game, but it's not supposed to be. As the title would suggest, it's more of a parody of the fun and weird side of the managing of rock stars, I guess. Already from the first seconds of the game, you get to see and hear how much of the game is heavily characterized. The game is told through the eyes of a former circus manager, Cecil Pitt, and his sidekick Clive, who have received an inheritance of £50,000, which is enough to get started. The first thing you need to do is decide how many rock stars you want to work with, and then select them from the TV screen by rewinding and forwarding, while your young sidekick comments on the costs of each rock star. Each star has an altered name to their real-life counterparts, such as Eddie Quicksilver, Witless Houston, Titchy Blackhead, Rick Ghastly, Mince, Bonehead, String. I wonder what sort of a lineup a modern remake of this game would have, and whether I'd recognize half of those names. Anyway, after you've picked your star or stars, you need to decide whether to get brand new equipment to tour with or one of the lesser expensive options, and name the band if you have more than 1 star in it. As with most managing games of this type, you get to lock your stars in a practice room for a few days, go on tours of various sorts, do publicity stunts, get a recording contract, and start making hits. You even get to shoot music videos with various questionable options, which might have an effect on how the single is doing on the weekly charts. It's mostly a game of chance, which can become infuriating, but the humor is so top-notch that it sort of makes up for all the random deaths and bankruptcies. Well worth putting some time into, if only for some laughs. If you're interested in reading about the differences between all the different versions of Rockstar Ate My Hamster, you can find a link to the comparison I wrote some years ago below in the video description. Here's a game that you don't hear talked about often enough. Lost Dutchman Mine puts you into the shoes of an Old West gold digger with a stereotypical Old West gold digger outfit. The game centers around a small town that features all sorts of services that you require and are able to use, such as a saloon, a merchant, a bank, an assay office for exchanging gold into money, a jail, and stables from which you can buy 3 horses to add to your carrying capacity. The game requires you to keep an eye on your health, hunger and thirst levels, which deplete at various paces. You are able to catch fish to get some food you don't have to pay for, apart from the hook you need to buy from the merchant. You can also buy any number of refillable water bottles from the merchant. To get started on your gold digging career, you will need to get a pan to get some smaller nuggets from the river, which you can exchange for cash to buy some better equipment. In order to get to the mines and get bigger gold nuggets, you need to buy a lamp, some matches and a pickaxe. You also need a gun and some bullets to defend yourself against stereotypical Indians that appear randomly out of nowhere and shoot arrows at you, as well as robbers that will take all your money that you carry if you have nothing to defend yourself with. For all the stuff you need to carry, you can also buy a few horses for extra capacity when you have enough money. You can also gamble at the saloon, and the saloon is also where you can get some sleep when you feel like it. A game about the Old West wouldn't be complete without the possibility of hunting down wanted criminals and delivering them to the town's sheriff. In this context, it's a bit more than absolutely necessary, but the chances of such occurrences are surprisingly slim. I admit to never have completed Lost Dutchman Mine, but I once watched a walkthrough video of it and realized that I don't even want to complete it. It's better left off as a nice place to revisit and relax with occasionally, and as such, it's a rare sort of a nostalgia trip candidate. Similarly to Lost Dutchman Mine and Skidmarks, I also mentioned the next game in the context of our second Random Ramblings episode of Retro Game Talk Show as a recommendation for the 16-bits. If you've been listening, you'll know that I'm talking about Hunter from Activision. What we have here is a three-dimensional, third-person, fixed-view, action strategy adventure game with sandbox mechanics, which you need to play with both joystick and mouse. There are 3 play modes in Hunter, each of which has different objectives and maps. I usually go for the missions option, in which obviously you need to complete missions by a certain protocol. You start by getting the info from the headquarters and picking up the necessary equipment from the nearby storages. Then you need to navigate your way to all the given coordinates and neutralize any enemy threat on your way. Killing innocents, human or other, as well as crashing any vehicle will decrease your score, and destroying enemy structures and personnel will increase score. The main point, however, is to complete any given mission within the allotted time and return to base before the time limit is up. The other 2 play modes are Hunter and Action, both of which have much longer objectives to complete by different methods. It's a game which can easily hog up your time even on shorter missions, and once you get into the rhythm of the game, it's easy to spend a few days at it with little regard for anything outside of the game. Hunter is definitely high on my list of Amiga nostalgia trip games, but it's also available for the Atari ST if you're interested in checking it out. We're gonna finish this episode with another old blog entry, DuckTales, The Quest for Gold. This is an entirely different game from the much more popular Capcom platformer for the NES, although you can't escape some platforming in this game either. The Quest for Gold was released on Commodore 64 and Amiga, Atari ST, DOS PCs, and if the internet can be trusted on this, even Apple II had a version. But I have still not been able to find disk images for it to update the comparison entry accordingly. As I wrote in the comparison, I'm definitely more partial to the Quest for Gold than the NES games, but the truth is, most of the game is barely even playable. The jungle platforming sections are, while relatively easy to master, not altogether natural in their flow. The mountain climbing sections are mostly a matter of memorizing the level maps in order to not get caught by hazards, and having more than a bit of luck at getting the climbing rope to actually get caught onto a ledge. The cave labyrinth sections are fairly easy to play. It's just point to a direction and press the fire button to enter the next screen. But despite the map at the bottom of the screen, you can never really tell where to go, unless you're playing the C64 version, because the 16-bit map doesn't tell you about blockages, so you need to map the labyrinths on paper anyway. Only the wildlife photography levels are easy and even somewhat relaxing to play. Happily, there are some less action-based sequences in the game which actually add some depth and content to the game, more specifically the money bin diving, the stock market, and gyro's flight segments. Although questionable in gameplay value, DuckTales The Quest for Gold is excellent as an interactive work of comic book art, and gives a much more, dare I say, realistic approach to how I always imagined the adventures in DuckTales would be, compared to the Capcom games. You don't really need to watch too many episodes of the original DuckTales TV series to realize this game was much more to the point, and for that I'd say it deserves a proper look. Just make sure you play it on either a PC or an Amiga, former for the comfort of speed and slightly better controls, and latter for the visuals and sonics. My nostalgia trips on this game are definitely on the Amiga.